All right, and we are back again with another episode of the IDPGuys Waiver Wire Show. Week 2 is concluded. We are happy to have you all here. It's myself, Michael Sicoli, joined here by Axton Harding. You can follow both of us on Twitter at our handles right below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching through audio, it's Michael__Sicoli and Axton at Harding_3. How are you doing today? This week 2 felt crazier than week 1, which honestly doesn't even feel possible.
Right, yeah, I agree, man. And week 1 was really weird, and this one just kind of continued on in its own little way. You had some big showings, but also a bunch of kind of disappointing performances as well. And but yeah, I'm not doing too bad right now. This last week of vacation, kind of enjoying my time with the little one and the wife. So not doing too bad. How you been doing this weekend?
I mean, I was doing okay, and honestly, as a Steeler fan, it's remarkable about how little I care or even thought about the Steeler game relative to everything else that happened, like the Jets, the drama, the Cardinals drama, the slaughter even of the Bills, the Bills slaughtering on Monday night and all that, and even the Vikings coming up short, and Jalen Hurts looked like an MVP. Like it was an insane week 2 of comebacks and collapses and all that. It was wild to watch, but all that comes down to waivers now, right? We're going into waivers. It's week 2. The frenzy of week 1 of now we have stats. Now we have actual footage. Now we have week 2. We got 2 weeks of it. It's a little bit more and just as important. So we're going to go through the defense first, just as we did last week, and then we're going to go to offense, take some questions. If you have any questions, be sure to comment them down below. We'll try to get to them at the end of either defense or offense, depending on what you comment. And we already have a few in the chamber, so let's just jump right into it. Axel, what's your number one defensive lineman for week 3? I guess now.
I was looking at Darren Payne, defensive tackle for Washington. He's had a sack in each of the first 2 games.
Actually, can we hear you? I can't hear you. We might be having some technical difficulties here on defensive lineman number 1, but I'll tag in while Axton tries to figure it out, and we have this lovely face jumping in right here. Daron Payne, defensive tackle, Alabama prospect from a few years back now. He's always been a good player, and he's always been flashing at getting to the ball, but it's kind of always a little bit difficult when you're that defensive tackle position. But we do know there's a different Washington unit. There's a Washington unit that had, it doesn't have Chase Young anymore. They have Montez Sweat working the sides, and they're utilizing their linebackers a little bit more than they had in recent years with Jamin Davis. Do you want to hop back in with Daron Payne if you had more points with him?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I got a call and it threw me out of the stream. So yeah, I think where I left off, Darren Payne had a sack in each of his first 2 games this year and a couple of passes deflected. So he's staying involved on that line. And with 7 tackles last week, 4 being solo and 3 assists, that's a pretty high tackle game for a defensive lineman. That's what you like to see with those guys that are on the front line and involved. He also has favorable matchups coming up in weeks 4 through 6, even through week 8. All teams that have given up 2 to 5 sacks a game, giving him prime opportunity to get to the quarterback. The only exception with that would be the Cowboys and Cooper Rush, who's really only been on the field as a starter for a game. He only got sacked once last week, but nonetheless, still an encouraging matchup coming down the line. And let's say that's going for the next 6 weeks. He's gonna have plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, I like you for everything I mentioned while you stepped out there, because he's always been that good player, and when all kinds start to come together, when that talent and the production comes, I do like to chase that combination. Thank you for the question, Casey. We're going to get to that at the end of the defensive section, so I don't want you to make doubt. We are not overlooking it. I just want to make sure you know that. Second defensive lineman pickup. We're going to double up a defensive tackle this week, and it's going to be Chris Jones. Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs. Might be on your wire because he is a defensive tackle. If he wasn't, he might not be because he is always been that freaking guy. He's just that good. He's always been a dominating pass rusher at defensive tackle. And with Karlaftis pressuring from the edge, as well as, the general pressure that Spagnuolo's defense kind of brings together at cornerback, especially with a cornerback we're going to talk about in a little bit, a guy, L'Jarius Sneed, just to spoil a little bit. They know how to bring pressure, and that really helps interior guys like defense, like Chris Jones, pressure from the inside when you have threats from the outside, from cornerback, from linebacker. It's all over the place with Spagnuolo's defense. He racked up 2 sacks on Thursday Night Football against Justin Herbert. He faces Tom Brady next week with that struggling Buccaneers line. I think he's a very good play. That's worth throwing a few bucks on. Any thoughts on Chris Jones, Axton?
Being a Chiefs fans, I kind of like that combination of Karlaftis on the outside and Chris Jones on the inside, because Chris Jones has always been in there making quarterbacks nervous, on a week in and week out basis, and to have Karlaftis coming out and like keeping that pressure on them in their blind spot, and just kind of always they got to watch from about every direction with this line, you know what I mean? And it seems like even with with the league's premier offenses, they can still manage to conjure up some sort of scheme and get the job done and still get 2 sacks on Justin Herbert. So he's more of like a stash for me, just kind of see how if they can continue this level of play. I don't know that I would immediately throw him into a starting lineup, but with one more week of kind of the same and similar production where these guys are really getting involved and getting hits on the quarterback, passes deflected, and things like that, I'd say as soon as week 4, he'd be in my starting lineup.
Last week we recommended George Karlaftis, who still got those snaps, still got those pressures, but didn't get to the quarterback, so that was a bit of a miss for this week. But obviously Kwity Paye came through. Big day for Kwity Paye, as it always is, because he's a good player. Dominique Robinson was our third name. He did not exactly pan out because he didn't see the jump and snap. So that was something we noted if you tuned in, was that he hovered around that 40% and he exceeded his expectations. He kind of did the same exact thing this week, around 54% of snaps, and still got to the quarterback, still logged pressures. But without the snaps, you have such a small margin of error. With guys like Karlaftis, where both are getting pressures, but one of them's on the field with a higher chance of making those plays actually happen. So I'm willing to cut bait on Dominique Robinson. It was a hopeful type of thing until we see the snaps go up. I think George Karlaftis, I'm willing to afford one more week at. Let's move on to linebackers, the meat of the IDP position. Last week we recommended Kamu Grugier-Hill, who had a shockingly bad game, honestly, and I do expect a full bounce back for him. Frankie Louvu, who was probably a number 1 pickup, who had yet again another huge day and avoided the mistakes that he made last week, so he might be a true season-long asset. Hope you guys listened and picked him up last week. And Nicholas Morrow, who still logged a lot of snaps, didn't exactly come through with the strongest day, if I remember right.
He had like 11 tackles.
Okay, well then I'm completely wrong and I'm misremembering. Yeah, he did have 11 tackles, tackle for a loss, and played 100% of snaps yet again. So there we go.
Love to see that. Love to see that out of your linebackers.
It's a very strong hit right there on the waiver. But let's move on to this one. At the top of it, before we get into one of these names, I'll let you go first, Axton. But just the names that you should not have on your wire. They might be for whatever reason, but Divine Diablo, we said pick him up last week. Pick him up. He is the full-time starter, regardless of Denzel Perryman. Denzel Perryman's not even healthy, and he is a true playmaker that this Raiders defense cannot afford not to have. So he was great again yet this week. He is pretty much a linebacker 1 moving forward. And Cody Barton should be a strong linebacker 2, played 96% of snaps this week. He's just going to have that valuable Seahawks role that we want. I do see a world that this fades throughout the season because Cody Barton's on an expiring contract and Seattle's season is not going to last too long. I can see them trying to work in younger guys that have a future for them. But in the meantime, and for the next 4+ weeks, Cody Barton is going to be a reliable guy that you can start based on the workload he has. But as for week 3, guys that actually are probably available on your wire, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. First up, we got Zaven Collins for the Arizona Cardinals. He unfortunately missed about 6 tackles this week, which is not great, but it's also encouraging to know that the opportunity was there. Had he gotten those 6 tackles, his performance would have been a much better, and it's not like he's just he's not involved and he's not getting the opportunities. So he can easily make a turnaround next week. What is encouraging is the fact that he did play every single snap. He's on the field every defensive snap 100% of the time, and he's done that for the first 2 games, both week 1 and week 2. So moving forward, yes, a little bit of a setback. I would expect him to bounce back next week. If he's sitting on your waiver wire, I'd go out and throw a few bucks at him and pick him up, because he's going to be someone that's going to give you a nice floor on your IDP side.
Yep, completely agree, and I really do like that pick because it fits perfectly what the Cardinals need to do, and it's got to stop the run. It's what they did last year. And the weird thing is with Isaiah Simmons, who played 61 snaps last week and all of a sudden played 15 this week. Regardless, Zaven Collins still got 96% snaps last week, 100% this week. It's a thin linebacker group since they let Jordan Hicks walk on to Minnesota. Zaven Collins has a good opportunity this year, regardless of how the Cardinals play. And he has every incentive to be out there. He's a first-round pick for them. They want him to succeed with this regime. So all that kind of helps to make him a really good pickup. I'll throw out another name, and it's after the Willie Gay suspension. Leo Chenal, rookie, big boy at 255 pounds, is going to be taking over for Willie Gay, who was suspended for 4 games with I don't quite know what he was exactly charged with. He did a few bad things. I'm not going to get into it, but the bottom line is that he's not going to be out there for the next 4 weeks, pending maybe an appeal that I haven't seen. All that means is that Leo Chenal, their rookie, their, I believe, 2nd-round pick, is going to have every opportunity to fill in for a Chiefs team that likes to rotate their players. Like I said before, like we say every week, we want Nick Bolton to get 100% of snaps, but he doesn't because they rotate their linebackers. And Willie Gay got 92% of snaps last week. He put up 11 tackles. He had 2 tackles for a loss. He put up a QB hit because, again, the Chiefs use their linebackers in such innovative ways. Leo Chenal, a big guy, is able to take that exact role because he's the next guy up. He's their guy that they drafted to be the next guy up. So all that pans out for a potential breakout in the short term, and someone I really like as a good fill-in. If you did just lose Willie Gay, or if you just lost, I don't know. If you're looking for a replacement on the wire, I think Leo Chenal is someone that your average league mate might not know, but I think he's a very good play against the Colts this week as well. A very run-heavy team. I think the Colts have to bounce back in some way from last week. And what that means is more plays, which means more rushing plays because of the Colts, and which means more tackles for Leo Chenal.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And with last week with the Colts, they didn't use Jonathan Taylor a whole lot because they were playing from behind. But with Michael Pittman coming back, I would expect them to lean a little bit more heavily on Jonathan Taylor, since I think they will put up a little bit more of a fight, so they won't be playing from behind quite so early. And with him running up the gut, he's going to run right into Leo.
Exactly.
And he's going to get plenty of opportunity while Willie Gay's out. The third linebacker we got on our list here is Malcolm Rodriguez. He played 46 snaps in week 1 and 54 in week 2, so he's getting a lot of usage and a lot of opportunity. And there's really no dominant, just heads above the rest linebacker in Detroit. I think we mentioned Anzalone last week, and it's just kind of the best that they got. He's out there and he's involved, but he's not just out here taking opportunities away from everybody else.
He's
so
really
I see.
He's really not good.
He's just present a lot, right?
Yeah.
So your Malcolm Rodriguez as a rookie coming in it looks like he's going to be able to carve out somewhat of a role in Detroit, and if he keeps up this level of production with 14 tackles through the first 2 weeks, I can see him really making a nice player out of himself early on this season. And especially with the efficiency that he's kind of had with the snaps that he's been given, I don't see why he wouldn't get any more opportunity, or why he wouldn't get more opportunities. So I wouldn't, for me, it'd be kind of more of like a stash and see if you have the room on your bench or something, you want to add a little bit of depth. He'd definitely be one that could possibly find his way into your starting lineups down the road. But I don't know that I would throw him into the fire quite yet.
I did actually bet on Alex Anzalone getting his over on tackles this week, which is 5.5, and that hit. Good on that guy. So he's in my good graces right now. I do think he's kind of entrenched in that starting job for a bit, but I mean they don't have anyone next to him, and a lot of teams do use those two linebacker sets and have two linebackers be very relevant. So I think it comes down to how much we see Tracy Walker come in the box and things like that. But definitely someone I like stashing for sure. So that's our linebackers. That's what we got for this section of the show for linebackers. Want to quickly bring up good old Marco coming in. I appreciate you jumping in for 2 weeks in a row now. That he's going to pick up Diablo because he's still in this league. That's why we bring it up, because there are leagues that the superstars, the studs, the guy that is Diablo now, and probably was before the season. We were talking about him as a sleeper in a lot of different articles. I know. Sometimes they slip through, and that's why we bring him up, just to reiterate in case he is, he maybe just check your wire, just in case.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't, because every league's different, and some leagues where this guy might be a little more obvious. It's always good we try to throw out those names that may not, that you may not think about, or that may not be as obvious in certain leagues, and just to kind of make sure, cover your bases. If he's out there, go ahead and snatch him. Absolutely.
Let's move on to defensive backs. Last week we had Nick Cross, which was my big name, and won't lie, really disappointing week 2 usage. He went from 100% snaps and went from all those box snaps all of a sudden being in a 3-way timeshare, and maybe that's why the Colts got obliterated and embarrassed Frank Reich. Maybe that's why you took your player off the field, but that's neither here nor there. With defensive back being as deep as it is, it's tough. It's tough because the usage was really bad for him. But somebody that wasn't, and we hit on our next 2 picks in a big way, I think, Talanoa Hufanga is the reason why Fred Warner is not doing anything right now, because that man is balling out, looking like Troy Polamalu out there, almost interceptions called back, but just huge tackle plays. He seems to be everywhere on the team, or everyone on the game. And I believe he's actually trained with Troy Polamalu. I was reading about that as well. I don't know, the hair runs in the safety generation.
He's got the hair.
But he was unbelievable last week. So I hope, again, another name, check your wire, because he's looking like a must-start type of player for the 49ers and for your IDP lineups. And the last name was Josh Jones, the guy who's filling in for Jamal Adams, who played a lot of snaps and was pretty good and will be a reliable starter. He faces the same variable that we said about Cody Barton before, about maybe the Seahawks are working in the younger guys who are under contract beyond this year. But in the time being, Josh Jones is a reliable guy. I think he's a low upside, but I think he could have a decent ceiling in Seattle, where there's going to be a lot of plays running against him. I do like Josh Jones still. But defensive backs. So kick us off for week 3, Axton.
First, we got Julian Love, a safety for the New York Giants. According to John Macri via Twitter, he's lined up as an off-ball linebacker for about 62% of his snaps this last week, which is actually very encouraging considering your DBs when they get involved and get in the middle of the field and they're able to make all those plays. You'd love to see that. And he even mentioned, it might not have been John Macri that mentioned this, but I saw that he had the green dot. Him and McKinney were sharing that on the defensive end of the field. And again, another indicator that he's just going to be out there and be on the field all game long, and lined up essentially as an off-ball linebacker. The opportunity is insane. And not to mention he was on the field for every single defensive snap, and being lined up as a linebacker, he was able to get 7 solo tackles and a sack last week, a game-saving sack, might I add.
Yep.
And just in my opinion, in general, if you have a defensive back that's getting high tackle volumes like this, you've got to roster him, especially if he's able to carry that from week to week. You can't leave those guys on waivers. I wouldn't mind spending, I don't know, 5% of your budget, possibly more on him. If he's going to really be involved and he's got the green dot, man, you can't beat that for a waiver wire pickup.
I completely agree. And let me just read you a headline from the IDPGuys newsletter from June. I believe it was June. I think it might have been July. But either way, follow your heart. Julian Love will be New York's sweetheart in the box. He is a good player. Again, subscribe to the IDPGuys newsletter. That's in the link in my Twitter bio. So be sure to check that out because you get amazing content like that months before it happens. Julian Love is a good player, and he has the size to be this role. With Blake Martinez gone, I really do like Julian Love, and the team likes him as well. I expect him to be extended by the Giants within a couple months. He's a good player. Another name, Richie Grant, safety of Atlanta, has always quietly been a good player in the league and never really got a ton of respect for it. But he had a team leading 10 tackles in week 1, 4 solo and 6 assisted. He had followed it up with 6 in week 2. And again, snap counts, that's what we care about. He had 60 plus in both weeks. He's a good play with as a stash. I'm not in love with him because I think we know what Richie Grant is at this point, but he's a safe play against good matchups coming up in Seattle, Cleveland, Tampa, San Fran. Those are all matchups that are good for safeties because of the high level of plays that they run against. All those teams are going to run a decent amount of plays, and all of them are going to run them in ways that are favorable for a safety to get tackles. Right? Is that fair to say, Axton?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you're looking at Seattle and Cleveland and Carolina alone, they are rostering 3 of the league's worst quarterbacks. So potential is definitely going to be there for him to come in and make plays and just add up those tackles and get involved and help those quarterbacks make the mistakes that essentially that they're placed. Because you know what I mean, they're bottom of the league for a reason, and he can help.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's see what we got. We got a couple other names we want to throw out here. All these guys. We have one of these names I think that we brought up last week as well. Nate Hobbs. I know you wrote him down here for good reason as well. Do you want to take away with Nate Hobbs because I think that's something we should have been on the radar about last week, which I think we mentioned, but if not, double down.
Yeah, we might have briefly mentioned him, but through the first 2 games, he's got 20 tackles as as a defensive back, and like we say, a cornerback, no less. We like those defensive backs that are getting those high tackle counts, and an average of 10 tackles a game is incredible for a cornerback. If he's out there, you want to go pick him up, and he's right now got actually the 8th highest PFF coverage grading of all NFL corners in the league. And if he's on your waiver wire as a top 10 PFF graded cornerback, that's a no-brainer. Go pick him up and reap the benefits.
Yeah, the good thing with tackling cornerbacks like that, especially when they have the PFF grade, obviously PFF grade is not getting you points, but it keeps him on the field because he's playing well, and that's just as important as as all these usage stats we're talking about. Another name I want to bring up was Roger McCreary. I'm sure a bunch of people were noting him on Monday night because he ripped off 4 tackles on that opening drive, finished with 11. And I've been debating with myself for a while of whether this is a flash in the pan. He's their rookie. I believe he was their first-round pick, if I'm not mistaken, the surprise first-round pick in Roger McCreary. He had 4 tackles in week 1, or I don't actually have his week 1 numbers in front of him, but the more important thing is that he played 98.5% of snaps this week, and he played a lot last week. The Titans, I'll spoil everyone now that this season is dust for the Titans. The Titans are not going to be contending. They have every incentive to keep their young player out there for that 98% role that he was pretty good in, and they really do like him. All reports are suggesting that, as they would with most first round Excuse me. Traylon Burks was their first round pick. Roger McCreary must have been their. Let me vet myself on that real quick. Accent. Roger McCreary. Yeah, Roger McCreary. Either way, he's playing a good usage role for a team that cannot stop another team's offense. And that's something that's valuable to me when there's just going to be so many plays going against him. In cornerback leagues, I think Roger McCreary is somebody that we should be talking about. I don't think we really care about him too much in defensive back formats. I think he's still going to be a little bit too volatile for that. But cornerback leagues, I think he's a name that we should absolutely be having on our radar.
Yep, absolutely. And like I think he actually, if I remember right, I think he did have a double-digit tackles this last week. So again, as quarterbacks with high tackle rates, you love those. The last name we wanted to mention was Miles Bryant, defensive back for New England Patriots. It seems like he's won the slot job in New England. He posted 8 tackles this week and actually saw a jump in his snap count from 53% last week to about 83% this week. He's getting more involved in that Patriots defense. And again, with the high tackle counts, you love to see those defensive backs getting involved and making plays. And he was definitely going to be one for the New England Patriots that they're really going to love to use this year.
Yep, and that is our defensive content, but we do have some questions to get to. Let's start with Slick Venom, who's one of our amazing subscribers, who sent it to us before the show. Again, if you do subscribe to the IDP guys, you do get access to our Discord channel. You get prioritized questions. You get to DM us whatever you need to with all of your questions. It's a hell of a deal that you should be definitely checking out. So he asked, can Cameron Curl take the job back? Obviously, Cameron Curl has dealt with that injury that's kept him off the field, and Derek Forrest has been a very capable stand-in. What do you think? Do you think Cameron Curl is going to get the job that he had?
I think Cameron Curl is probably going to come back to somewhat of a split role. I think Derek Forrest has performed probably too well for them not to get him involved in the offense. I'm not going to say that he's going to steal the role from Cameron, but I think we talked about it a little bit before the show, and I think that I agreed with you when you said that the Commanders are just going to find a way to keep Payne involved. It may not be in that position that Cameron Curl is ideally looking to come back to, but they're probably going to float him around all over the defense, which inevitably will cut somewhat into Cameron Curl's time. It's just kind of a wait and see. I'm not really diving all in on either one at this point, but Cameron Curl could definitely still come back and maintain his and hold on to his role. Like I say, it's just kind of a wait and see how it plays out when Cameron Curl comes back, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you put it perfectly well. I think I've always liked Cameron Curl as a player. I think he is a good player, and that's why I don't think he disappears. But at the same time, Washington is off to a pretty darn good start, and I don't think they're going to take out someone who's been a big part of that. Derek Forrest has played very well. He's got an interception. He's posted the tackle numbers. He's forced a fumble. He's been a big part of what they're doing. I think they're going to continue to ride that hot hand a bit, and they might ease Cameron Curl back a little bit from an injury as well. So, it's the type of thing I don't want to play either of them when they're both active until I see the split.
Absolutely. And with guys coming off injury, you really kind of want to be hesitant when you're talking about their returning from their first game back from the injury. Very few times are you going to see guys come back and just absolutely crush it in their first game. You know what I mean? So just kind of, as we mentioned, temper your expectations and just kind of be patient and just kind of watch the situation and see how it unfolds.
Yep, completely agree. We've got another question right here in the chat from Casey, asking about Rashad Weaver, the defensive end for the Titans, someone that we brought up as Harold Landry's gone, obviously, sadly, with that ACL, and that's a big reason why I think the Titans are done. But Rashad Weaver is the guy that is filling in and obviously posted a 0 last night. Now, it's a mixed bag of my interest in Rashad Weaver because he saw a career high last night because Bud Dupree was also knocked out with an injury. So I don't think he's that good of a player. That's my issue here. And that's kind of really important with these defensive ends because sacks don't just happen. Sacks are not really a usage stat as much as they are, just you have to be a good player to get sacks. So, or you have to be put in a better position to succeed. And I don't know if Rashad Weaver is that guy, especially if, there's no one else taking away double teams. Harold Landry's not taking a double team. Bud Dupree's not here to take a double team. And he has the usage. So I don't mind stashing him, but I couldn't bring myself to start him until I see some reliable production. What do you think?
That's exactly what I would tend to agree with is just he's not someone you want to go ahead and abandon or dump, but you kind of want to put him in timeout of sorts. You know what I mean? He's getting all the opportunities. You just want to make him prove to you that he's worthy of that starting spot in your lineup. But I don't think he's warranted a drop just yet. That usage and snap count is going to be important, and it could turn around. Like you said, he's not just going to come out and be that's just absolute standout player, but he might give you a decent floor as the season goes along. So I'm not completely out on him, but I'm not just gonna shake it off and say that it was an anomaly and put him in my starting lineup.
Yep, completely agree. And we have one more question, something that was really going back and forth in our IDP Discord chat. The concerns over Fred Warner and Isaiah Simmons. Obviously, both are drastically underperforming based on where you drafted him at, positions that you might be able to replace as well at linebacker, depending on your format. What is your level of concern for each? Like, let's put let's call it 1 to 10. 1 to 10, how are you concerned? 10 the most concerned, 1 the least.
I would say with Isaiah Simmons, I'm probably a little bit more so concerned. I would put my level of concern after his performance last year, probably like a 7.5 or an 8, especially after his snap count last week. 15 snaps is absurd. I'm not sure if there's any specific reason to the drastically low snap count or if it's just something you almost want to think that there was a cause for it, you know what I mean? But it just that 15 snaps is really just unattractive. I'm not going to go out and say that we need to drop him. It might be tough to get rid of him, but really either one, I'm more or less just kind of holding on to him, and I'm not really entirely out. Like I say, we're still really early on in the season, and this stuff can kind of work itself out with Simmons really changing his position and moving back into the defensive back role. It might take a little bit of time for him to kind of get comfortable in that role. So I would sit back and be patient. But again, probably that level, I'm quite a bit more concerned about him moving forward than I am Fred Warner. I think Fred Warner performed too well last season for us to give up on him in week 2. I think he was one of the premier linebackers last year, and two underwhelming performances this year is cause for concern. I would rate my level of concern probably more like a 5, kind of a middle of the road, because he still has the talent. He's still on the field. He's still logging those snaps, and I think it's really just kind of a matter of time for him to step back into kind of what he did last year. I'm not really out on him yet. Again, with that, the capital you have in him, most likely you just be patient and just kind of wait and see another wait and see game. You hate to see these high tier or linebackers or IDP guys really kind of underperform for you. But again, I wouldn't count Warner out. I'm not nearly as concerned with him as I am Isaiah Simmons.
What I'm doing with Fred Warner is I agree that I don't want to overreact because I think he's still a very good player. My concerns before the year was that they were going to drop him in too much. I didn't exactly anticipate Hufanga jumping into the box as much as he is, but that's
agree.
Real. That's happening, and they're not going to take him away because he is making so many plays for them. So absolutely. I'm worried about Fred Warner. I'm also worried about Isaiah Simmons because he was practicing with defensive backs in preseason. He's splitting his reps. It's just I don't get losing, going from 61 snaps to 15 snaps this past week, especially when you go against Darren Waller. I feel like they could have tried placing Simmons on Waller at times. I think that could have been a very good matchup for them, but I'm not the coach. I'm not a football coach. So I have equal concerns about both. The type of situation where I don't want to cut either. I'm not going to make a rash decision there and say cut them, but I'm more than willing to be streaming them with the names that we're talking about. I think I'm willing to play Cody Barden over these guys right now. I'm willing to play guys that are on the wire right now that we're talking about on the show that we talked about last week. This is where you adjust and say, listen, maybe I was wrong on my pick. I'm not going to you have to be water. You have to say, listen, I spent this pick. It was great. I drafted Fred Warner high in the league myself, but I'm going to bench him until he shows me something. And if he doesn't show me something, I'm going to cut him, and he doesn't hurt my active roster. But you're avoiding that type of risk in a way. It's just you got to be a little bit level headed with it. We have a question to come in that I love how well worded it is from Jay Peterson. Am I sick in the head to offer Aiden Hutchinson in an early 2023 second round rookie pick for Micah Parsons?
Ooh, I don't know. After last week, you might get a biter, but Micah Parsons has been doing pretty well this week. I probably wouldn't give up Micah Parsons for Aiden Hutchinson. If I were holding on to Parsons, just because again with Aiden Hutchinson did have a monster week, but it's weeks like that aren't sustainable. And I want to see more consistency. I want to see more week in, week out production. I don't want to see up and down production. If I'm giving up Micah Parsons, I want to make sure I have that safe floor that I'm gonna be giving up.
Let me toss a stat at you with Aiden Hutchinson just to make this even more fun. Aiden Hutchinson is the first defensive player since 2002 to have a 3+ sack game in his first 2 starts. Just to throw that out there, and I'm not making you tilt one way or another, but he is just so fun to watch.
Oh,
that said,
he is.
That said, I would also take Micah Parsons, so I would try sending it. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely worth a shot there. And if you have somebody that's not nearly as experienced as maybe yourself, you might get someone to bite on that, especially after such a big game. These are the weeks like after you get a young guy who's performed a very big game like that. You can cash in on those performances sometimes, and it's definitely not. I'm not opposed to throwing out that offer and seeing if somebody will bite on something like that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't love obviously moving any 2023 pick, especially one that you think is going to be an early second, because I think that's going to be very valuable, but it's all relative to value. So I think this is a deal. I would not be surprised if this got accepted personally. So I would take the Micah Parsons side though. So not second ahead. I say charge forward with the J.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that is our defensive side of it. Let's move on to the offensive side of the ball. We got quarterbacks right now. The popular streaming candidate that is quarterback. So last week we had Carson Wentz, who popped off yet again. I believe that was more your pick, Axton. So congrats. He is balling out, the QB3, I believe, right now. And I had forgiving Matt Ryan, which I wholeheartedly apologize to each and every one of you if you took that advice, because Matt Ryan was unwatchably bad. And I was wrong for that. I was wrong to suggest a bounce back against the Jaguars defense. They got lit up by Carson Wentz. So
I give yourself some credit. I think Pittman got ruled out after we had the show.
Pittman was a midweek injury, to be fair. Yes, I will say that, and I'll cut myself some slack there. And also Alec Pierce, I didn't anticipate missing as well, but more so the Pittman midweek. Pittman missing definitely would have taken him off my streamer to begin with, I guess. So number one on the wire, I think it's a pretty obvious name, but go for it. Take it away.
With Trey Lance's injury and his season now being over, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be hands down the most desired quarterback on your waiver wire. He was the QB 16 from 2021. I don't see why he shouldn't just pick up kind of right where he left off. He's already got the rapport with his receivers, and he knows how this offense runs. I would say, I think we talked about it before a little bit, about a 10% budget bid would be pretty reasonable. I would even, you could even go up a little bit, just kind of depending on the looks of your team. If you're a little bit more needy, don't feel bad for throwing a few extra bucks on him, but he's definitely going to be the safest waiver wire pick at the quarterback position.
Yep. I completely agree. And someone that I'm actively going out for in a league where I have both Tannehill and Matt Ryan as my backups. So I need another name in there. Jimmy Garoppolo is currently that guy for me. And again, we have to remember that the weapons in San Fran are amazing. And we haven't even seen them with George Kittle yet this year, who should be back this week, God willing. Hope he's okay. Definitely love Jimmy Garoppolo there. Another name, Jared Goff. Did you anticipate, Axton, that Jared Goff would be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this season because that's what he is.
I did not. Is that where he's sitting right now? Yeah, no, I didn't expect him. I mean, he's got all the weapons in the world to be a high-end, top-end quarterback. He's just really not much for throwing. You got guys like Derek Carr that throw for 400 yards a game, but they don't always throw touchdowns. Then you got other guys that might throw a lot of touchdowns and not get a whole lot of yardage, and that's kind of where Jared Goff was this last week, throwing 4 touchdowns, but he hardly broke the 250-yard mark. I think that considered, I wouldn't expect this every single game. He's going to be more of anywhere from like a 2 to 3 touchdown, about 250 yards a game kind of quarterback. But given a good matchup, I think, I think you're going to see a few more of these games throughout the year. I don't see him finishing quite as high as where he's placed right now.
Yes,
definitely.
I did have it wrong. He's actually a top 10 quarterback, but the concept remains the same with Jared Goff.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the matchup against Minnesota. We've seen this defense get. I'm not out on Minnesota's defense, but they did just get destroyed by Jalen Hurts last night. They could obviously contain Aaron Rodgers in week 1, but Aaron Rodgers has no weapons on this kind of a toothless passing attack in a way. So I think it's a good matchup for Jared Goff with game script that should be in his favor with Minnesota. And the best thing is that you can play him 2 weeks in a row because he faces Seattle after that. And I'm fine targeting that matchup entirely. So I think you get 2 weeks to play out of Jared Goff. I think it's worth throwing a couple bucks on if you do need a starter. Mm-hmm. Any other quarterbacks you want to mention, or we can move on to running backs?
We can throw it out there. With the Tennessee situation we were mentioning and their season kind of being over, you might keep an eye out on Malik Willis. Seemed like the Titans were kind of giving him some reps in garbage time last night. So Michael and I were talking before the show, and we mentioned that we wouldn't be surprised if in the next few weeks they start throwing him in there more. And if they know their season's done, by the end of the season, you may see him in there full time. At this point in time, though, I wouldn't go dropping a lot of your budget on him. If you've got the roster space in a deeper league or something, you can stash him and just kind of get ahead of the game. You're not really losing much if you do pick him up on the low for right now. But if you don't have the spot, I'd just go ahead and leave him on the waivers for now. But just kind of someone to keep an eye on. Yep,
because that rushing upside is fantastic. Let's move on to running backs, a very fun position this week because as each week, Axton, this is going to get a little bit less fun to talk about for running backs. So obviously the big name initially was James Conner went down. Now the injury isn't supposed to be super serious. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. But last week we talked about Jeff Wilson, who was the big pickup out of San Francisco that obviously smashed. So I hope you guys won that waiver bid. We talked about Rex Burkhead, which didn't totally come through. Dameon Pierce took a bigger step this week. But the big shout out to Axton here, who pulled out the wheelbarrow, so to speak, and just pulled out the Jamal Williams take. And honestly, Jamal Williams, I'm loving the usage there.
Absolutely. He gets those valuable touches right around the goal line. And for some reason, DeAndre Swift will get you about a 50 or 60-yard run just inside the 10, and they like throwing Jamal Williams in there to punch it in the end zone. So definitely a kind of a weekly streamer if you're needy at the position. I played him in Scott Fishbowl this week, and I was fairly happy with the results. So
yeah. So let's talk about the actual pickups for this week. Eno Benjamin, Darrell Williams, just in case James Conner is not good to go. The injury is not supposed to be serious. I believe it was to his ankle. Now, they had a near 50-50 split. Eno Benjamin was splitting in with James Conner, and then all of a sudden, the second half, when James Conner got hurt, they threw in Darrell Williams, who was more efficient on the ground. Eno Benjamin was slightly better as a receiving back. All in all, I think we should weigh in that this Cardinals offense is not really that good right now. Yes, they came back and made a 20-point comeback against the Raiders, but it's a sticky situation that both guys that they're eating into each other are not going to be great. And James Conner, who was still suited up on the sideline, just didn't go back in. He's still there. And I do think James Conner is still going to be good to go. So if anyone of your league mates are trying to jump on the Arizona train, I think both of us are kind of leaning towards staying out. If I had to pick one, I'd go Eno because I think he's a better receiving back, but I'm pretty hands-off it entirely.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Definitely appeals more in the PPR formats, and I would tend to agree. that if I if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably go Eno. But all in all, I think I agree there too that I'm just kind of avoiding that backfield besides James Conner.
Yep. Let's touch on every single week. Sadly, we have that because, like Elijah Mitchell last week, who is now out for 2 months, we have Tyrion Davis-Price, who came in. He got a surprising amount of work. He was still third on snaps behind Jeff Wilson and Kyle Juszczyk, but he did get a decent amount of work, and now he's out for 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So if people do want to chase the next man up in San Francisco, which is a relevant role, especially when we keep seeing them go down, hopefully that doesn't happen. But at some point, there's a pattern that it's kind of worth chasing that type of upside. Jordan Mason is probably that guy. I might sound like a broken record on that, but given that he wasn't it this week, could give a glimpse to Marlon Mack, who's on the practice squad right now, who could get elevated. And I wouldn't be surprised if he had a Tyler Algier type of workload from this past week. Kind of low value carries, but in the right matchup, it could work. I also would be surprised if they brought someone in because they just keep on losing. People. But yeah,
absolutely. And those 49ers backs, they get their touches too. So if you find some of these guys getting involved heavily, they're gonna get that consistent involvement in the offense. But I think we kind of touched it's pretty well Jeff Wilson's backfield right now until he loses.
Yes.
So
absolutely. And
the
also
last running back we got. Go ahead.
Sorry, no. I was going to chime in with some kind of related breaking news. Just that Mike Evans is going to appeal his suspension, his 1-game suspension. The same guy that heard his appeal in 2017, who I think turned it down, is going to hear that. Go on with the running back take.
That's interesting for sure. Our last running back here, we got J.D. McKissic. He's kind of just one of those weekly waiver wire pickups that's always going to be involved in the passing game. And you like those those running backs that catch passes out of the backfield. And yeah, he's not getting a high amount of volume, but when you're getting 5 to 8 catches a game, he definitely produces when he gets the opportunities. So if you're really needy some weeks, J.D. McKissic would be someone to that I wouldn't mind throwing in a flex spot if you really need it. Again, none of these running backs are really sexy picks, and as you mentioned, as we get on to the year, it's really going to get even more murky unless for some reason we just have a bunch of injuries or backups just come out and shine. But definitely consider J.D. McKissic if you really need a fill-in for a week.
Yep, and he's just such a good pass blocker, and he's so valuable to what they want to do on offense that he's always out. Like he's out there. He's going to hover around 40% of snaps. It's never going to jump to 100, but it's a valuable role because when he's out there, he's pass blocking or he's running out for a route. And when you're really going scrappy at running back, when you're going 0 RB at running back, you lost Elijah Mitchell, you didn't get Jeff Wilson. J.D. McKissic's probably there for you. You could play him in a pinch. Is there that's what we got for running back because that's more than enough, honestly. But wide receivers, we have a lot of names here because the receivers are important because last week we touched on Curtis Samuel popped off. Zay Jones had a good week. Josh Palmer had a good week. DPJ, do you know what DPJ did? I actually did not check.
I don't know, honestly. What he,
do you mind checking that while I keep going through?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously we had DPJ last week. And Jahan Dotson / DJ Chark. Now, DJ Chark almost had a big reception that Jared Goff just missed him on, but obviously finished with a 0 day. That's disappointing. But Jahan Dotson is someone I want to bring up because I think I'm all in. I think I'm all in, honestly, on a guy that I liked coming out. He was very comparable to Terry McLaurin for me, actually. And he's only seen 10 targets through the 2 games. It's 5-5. And he scored 3 touchdowns on that thing. It's not sustainable to be averaging a touchdown a week for Jahan Dotson. I do think Washington will eventually take a step back when they're not playing Jacksonville defense, Detroit's defense. But the usage is what I like. He played 99% of snaps this week. The Washington went into a full 3 wide receiver set for the first time I think I've seen under Ron Rivera. So I think he's just a playmaker that I really do want to be stashing and playing in plus matchups because they want him to be that guy. That's why they took him so high in matchups. And thank you for the comment there that DPJ did nothing. Because
I was just about to say he had
yeah,
one target, and so
yeah,
that pick last week didn't quite.
yeah.
But it was Amari
No,
Cooper's show last week.
yeah,
Amari Cooper finally came out and got like 10 or 11 targets. So that just seems kind of
and
how that
and
wide
we
receiver core
acknowledge
is going
that.
to go.
Yeah, we acknowledged that last week as well. Was that I'm interested in DPJ with Deshaun Watson. I'm not interested with DPJ with Jacoby Brissett because you can get these 0-point games. He can get 11
Mhm.
targets and he can only catch 5 of them like he did in week 1, or I think he caught less because Jacoby Brissett's terrible. But the offense is going to run through the ground until, and it probably will still even with Deshaun Watson, but that's not going to change for the time being. So DPJ is really just a long-term stash, which you're not doing in normal redrafts. You're just looking to pick him up later. But the picks for week 3, Axton, let's jump into that. Corey Davis. I'll let you take it away because I think we both like this pick.
Yeah, Corey Davis, wide receiver for the New York Jets. He has had 14 targets in the first 2 weeks of the season. In week 1, he had 6 catches for 77 yards, which is, I mean, high volume, double-digit targets. You like to see him he's consistently involved in this offense. And it seems to me after week 1 getting getting the 77 yards, in week 2 he took a little bit of a downturn, only getting 2 catches on 4 targets, but he had even more yards and even scored a touchdown. And I think that's kind of where Corey Davis's bread and butter is going to be this year, is he's going to be that big body that they're going to look to in the end zone. And honestly, just seeing 70 plus yards for the first 2 games, it's encouraging as far as his outlook for the rest of the season, considering Garrett Wilson also went off and Elijah Moore is a favorite in this offense. But it's also kind of it's tricky with this offense right now with Joe Flacco in there and knowing that Zach Wilson's going to come back and Flacco has just kind of been going with the hot hand, but it seems like through all in all, Corey Davis has kind of been there getting that being consistent, as far as performance goes. What I'm not sure that I'm sold on a start. I feel like there might be better options out there if you're in a pinch, but definitely somebody that you could stash if you got the roster room. And he's definitely a player that can come out and produce for you if he's given the right opportunities.
Yep. I like Corey Davis because he's a perfect fit for this team that everyone was thinking, well, Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore are going to take over. It's not going to happen because there's real life football as well. And Corey Davis is the best blocking wide receiver they have on this team. It's perfect for what Robert Saleh wants to do. It's kind of what Jawan Jennings is doing in San Fran to give the San Fran to New York comp. And Corey Davis is a quality player. So I completely agree. I think you could start him with Joe Flacco. I want to wait and see with Zach Wilson because I still have my questions about him. But really, my big takeaway from the Jets is that the sky is the limit. The team's ready. If Zach Wilson is that guy, the ceiling is really high for everyone involved. Like Miami levels high. I really do believe that the coaching staff is in place. The offensive line is still not great, but it's better. But they should get Dwayne Brown eventually. They should get an upgraded quarterback. Tyler Conklin's a better tight end they had last year and all that. We've been through it all season, but the Jets are on the right track. Let's talk about this second name, Noah Brown. Now, I love that you put this one down because I've always been a deep down fan of Noah Brown. I think he's been a good player. He's someone who's hung around on this Cowboys roster for a few years now. And he saw 14 targets in the first 2 weeks. Again, we talk about how targets are earned; they're not given. And these have been tough matchups. The Cowboys have played. Oh my goodness, I'm having a blank right now. Obviously, they played they played the Bengals in week 2, obviously, and week 1 they played they were shellacked. The Bucks. They played the Bucks, and then the Bucks and Bengals. The Bengals defense has been somewhat seedy, but it's supposed to be a better unit than what we saw. The Bucks unit Bucks is a great defense. And he's commanded those targets in that span. He put a 5 for 9 for 68 yards in week 1. He followed up for 5 for 5 for 91 and a tutty in week 2. So that's all great. And I do project a step back for the Cowboys. I don't think they're going to be winning games with Cooper Rush too much. And I do project Michael Gallup to come back. So that's kind of the interesting thing here is I like Noah Brown. I do think Michael Gallup will be eased back into this offense. He won't be jumping into 80% snaps. So what are you willing to put down on Noah Brown for your fab budget? Because I want him in my dynasty circles. I'm not looking at him in a redraft yet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Because it's tricky with your dynasty because I don't know how much I see or how far I see Noah Brown going in the future. You know what I mean? When everything gets kind of reset, they get all their players back and they get back in their rhythm. I think he kind of goes back to where he was before. But with Cooper Rush at quarterback and this offense is kind of just scrambling to get any kind of consistency going. At least while Cooper Rush is in there, I really like him for a streamer. Honestly, he seems to be that reliable wideout for him and even Dak from week one for this offense. And like you said, you mentioned Michael Gallup coming back from an ACL tear. Again, like you mentioned, he's probably just going to be eased back in. He might have been making strides in the preseason or in practice and whatnot, but I don't. Michael Gallup's just not going to come in and just take over the show right out of the gate. Coming off an injury like that, I'm really tempering my expectations with that kind of return, and especially in a struggling offense.
Yep. Let's move on to tight ends. Last week, this was a string of hits over here, which is happy for me to see. Gerald Everett was a good play. Obviously, he had the bum play where he didn't run the flat route right, and he was gassed, which was just unfortunate, but still was a decent streamer this week. Logan Thomas got himself that touchdown, had a good week. Hayden Hurst is also seeing tremendous volume. Is currently the tight end 9 from what I see, and it's definitely a good play right there. So hoping we keep that going this week. The name that I want to throw out, if he's on your wire because people overreacted to week 1, Dawson Knox, don't let him be. Pick him up. He's still on the field. He's still running routes. He was that close to a touchdown. And then Stephon Diggs went over and stole it from him. But I'm not bitter, I swear. So let's get into the tight ends. Juwan Johnson, I could have mentioned him last week because I've been picking him up on the wires everywhere. He's got 70-80% snaps in back-to-back weeks. He's running routes on all those plays pretty much because Adam Troutman is also getting snaps and he is strictly blocking. Adam Troutman is not running out beyond it. Juwan Johnson, the converted receiver, is averaging almost 14 yards per catch. Those are valuable touches. And he goes against Carolina. So Carolina has not allowed a ton to the tight end so far this season. Obviously, we have a very small sample size to do that off of. But I think the Saints can bounce back and put up a decent amount of points and get in the red zone, which unlike they did this week, where Juwan Johnson he's got the volume, he's got the receiving work so far. He just hasn't got the touchdown. And I think that could change this week against Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the volume is the most encouraging part because if you know somebody's getting the ball often, you know that the touchdowns are inevitably going to come. So definitely shooting for those high volume tight end targets. I'd say in addition to Juwan, we'd still like Everett coming off waivers. Your Logan Thomas for Washington, he seems to be a favorite in the red zone. He's going to be peppered with touchdowns throughout the season. Hurst, I think he's only going to get better as the year goes. Njoku is kind of someone to keep an eye on. I'm personally more in on Njoku more so when Watson returns. So later on in the year, I think he becomes a more valuable candidate. For now, we really don't. Yeah. I'm not going to touch him for now, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's a desperation play if George Kittle doesn't play again. And I'd still play Juwan Johnson over him, and Juwan Johnson is definitely on your wire right now. So you probably don't need to dig deeper for David Njoku, but he does play on Thursday, which is a short week for Harrison Bryant to come back. He got kind of nicked up. He was did not practice on Monday, which they didn't actually practice because it's a short week and it's a day after they played a football game. So we'll see how he practices on Tuesday, but the more routes for David Njoku, the better. And he saw 5 targets last week. I think they can beat the Steelers. The Steelers like to get mossed by the tight end. So there is upside there that I think he could be a fine start. I would still play Everett, Logan Thomas, Hayden Hurst, Juwan Johnson over him though. So you probably don't need to dig that deep.
Right.
All right.
Absolutely.
Let's jump into a few questions because we have a few, and then we're gonna wrap this up. Obviously, go long this week, but we'd like to go as long as we need to get you guys the information you need. Antonio Gibson, Dalvin Cook, and Debo. for Jamar Chase, Keenan Allen, and James Robinson in a full PPR league. What side are you taking?
Jamar Chase, Keenan Allen, James Robinson, Gibson, Dalvin Cook, and Debo. I think I like the Gibson side personally. I know that Jamar Chase has got insane talent. Keenan Allen's going to give you 10 targets plus a game. James Robinson's just coming out and balling. But I'm not out on Dalvin Cook yet. Debo Samuel is a favorite target of Jimmy Garoppolo for the rest of the season. He is going to just absolutely ball out with Elijah Mitchell out. He's got those rushing incentives. I think Debo is going to be a lot more involved, and I think Dalvin Cook also has better days ahead of him. Minnesota just didn't play that great last night and for the first couple of weeks, but I'm really not out on him. Same thing with Antonio Gibson. I've liked Antonio Gibson. I know there's been a lot of hate on him with Brian Robinson being there. But I think he's just too good to fade completely out of that offense. He was a top 11 to 13 running back for his first 2 seasons in the league. You're not just going to dump off a top 15 running back for a 3rd round rookie pick. I'm not saying that Brian Robinson isn't going to get involved and get his own workload, but I think that they're going to find a way to still keep Gibson relevant.
And I think the big thing here, I would also take the Dalvin Cook side, because the usage there, I'm still very in on Dalvin Cook as well. Trendy Gibson has been more involved than I thought he would. But the biggest thing here is Debo, where this is Debo with Jimmy Garoppolo now, where we like the Trey Lance variable, sadly, it's gone. And that's good for Jimmy Garoppolo, or that's good for Debo, because we know what Jimmy Garoppolo and Debo are, which is fantastic for fantasy. So, and I also don't want to mess around with Keenan Allen coming on a hamstring injury when we talk about the equivalent talents. It's just the variables in between. So I would take the Dalvin Cook side personally. One more question, or another question coming from Marco. What should you hold on to Danny Gray in Dynasty? I am facing that question myself in one of my leagues, in the Creator League, actually, Axton. And
really?
The league is not deep enough for me to hold him. So he finally got active this week. He was a healthy scratch week 1, played 3 snaps. And I think he saw 2 targets on those 3 snaps for the record. So good for him there. They tried to get him the ball. I need to be. He needs your dynasty league needs to be deep enough. Like that's a very general answer, so I'll give you a number. Like I think if you have an 18-person bench, I could play him. If I'm at 15, I think that's the cutoff for me. And it always comes down to who you have available. And waiver wires are very shoddy, but I'll bring up a name. Cole Beasley right now is going to be a hot pickup as well. We should have mentioned him at the wide receiver part.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now signing with the Bucks will be elevated. I would pick up Cole Beasley over Danny Gray, regardless of age, because he has that upside. And while we should have probably brought him up before, honestly, but Cole Beasley, worth throwing a few bucks on because he could be, he's probably going to be the wide receiver 2 for the Bucks this week. And I don't know the role beyond that, but the slot is open while Chris Godwin's out. So I definitely did. Cole Beasley is definitely someone to keep in mind. I would pick him up over Danny Gray, and Cole Beasley's on the wire, and I believe 80% of sleeper leagues right now.
And Tom Brady loves those Julian Edelman kind of type wide receivers where he's going to just run slants all over the middle of the field and make it money.
You can say it, white slot guys. He throws to the white slot guys.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. But yeah, I'm like you on Danny Gray. It's really only in your deeper leagues that I'm really trying to roster or hold on to him. I think there's just too many other options that have more potential and upside.
I'll make the contingency that in that league where I'm looking at, I don't have a taxi squad available. So if I have a taxi squad, I'm willing to stash Danny Gray in it for next year. And I think that's a 13-spot bench, and you have a 3 IDP on the bench. I am cutting bait on Danny Gray then, because I don't think he's going to give you a single lick of production this year. And even beyond that, I mean, I wasn't super high on him as a prospect. I imagine most people know him just because he happened to be a day 2 pick. So I 13 spot bench, as you bring up right here. I'm cutting bait there. I think you could definitely find better players on the wire, especially when you bring in IDP in that factor.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Appreciate the questions from everyone. As always, we're going to wrap up now because this was a super fun episode. We're running a little bit long. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, be sure to follow IDP Guys on Twitter. Check out the content on the website at idpguys.org. And if you're not subscribed, why not? I mean, honestly. So check that out. all that. And of course, subscribe to the IDP Guys newsletter. That's in my bio, in my Twitter, right over here at Michael__Sicoli. Follow Axton at Harding_3 for all that amazing content. He's crushing it right over there. I'm trying to always point in the right direction. But thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, as we always are, answering your questions, giving you your waiver wire goodness. Have a good day. Good luck on your waivers. Good luck on your week 3 matchups.